So looking at our first example here, it says graph the image of the figure using the transformation given. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get the coordinates of the points as they are now. I have that J, it doesn't matter where we start. I have the J as it is 1, 0. If I look at H as it is 5, 1. And if I look at I, the coordinates of I are 4, 4. But then I look at my rules and I'm asking to rotate this 90 degrees counterclockwise. If I look at the board, 90 degrees counterclockwise, it says x y, it's going to become negative yx. So in reality, what that says is my numbers are going to flip, and then the value that it's the value that it's y is going to switch signs. So j prime, there's no such thing as negative 0. So I'm just going to write 0, 1. If I look at h prime, I'm going to call this negative 1, 5. Notice that I flip my numbers, but the y value, I switch the sign. And my I prime will be negative 4, 4. Right? The y value switches signs. Yes. Because there's no such thing as negative 0. So I'm just going to write it like that. Now let me plot those points in. J prime is 0, 1. So that's J prime. I prime is negative 1, 5. That's I prime. And then, H prime. And then I prime is negative 4, 4. When I connect my points, if you see it, it looks like I graphed the paper and I rotate it 90 degrees against the clock. Like probably you guys can visualize it. I just got the coordinates. I look at my rule to see what happens to my coordinates, and then I plug those in. Any questions on this one? Let's take a look at my example number 2. I'm going to ask you guys to graph this one. And here I want you guys to do a reflection across the x-axis. For the way I'm going to work this, I'm going to use the coordinates. So let me get the coordinates the way I have them now. D, the coordinates of D are negative 3, 4. The coordinates of E are 2, 3. And the coordinate of C are negative 2, 0. So this is why in the homework, I ask you guys to deal with coordinates, because I know you guys have to deal with them. According to a rule on the board, reflection across the x-axis, it says that x y becomes x negative y. The negative y doesn't mean make it to a negative. Doesn't say make the y value a negative. It just says change the sign. So my d prime is going to become negative 3, negative 4. I changed the sign on the y. Right? It was positive, made it into negative. If it was negative to begin with, I would have changed it to positive. Now e prime is going to be 2, negative 3. I just changed the sign on the y value. And if I look at c prime, it's going to be negative 2, 0. Once again, there's no such thing as negative 0. So I get those coordinates. When I plot them in, negative 3, negative 4, 2, negative 3, and then negative 2, 0. And I connect them. It seems like my picture got flipped over the x-axis. The interesting part is that my point C stayed the same, because when the point is on the mirror line to begin with, right, let me highlight my mirror line. When a point is on the mirror line to begin with, stays on the same spot, right? It doesn't move. So that's the interesting part of my point C. It did not move. It was on the mirror line to begin with. So you guys can see that it flipped over the x-axis. Any questions on this? No? Okay. Let's take a look at numerical only. So I'm going to do 2 examples on this case. So I'm asking you to find the coordinates of the vertices of each figure after the given transformation. According to a rule on the board, rotation of 180, it says that x, y becomes negative x, negative y. Once again, it doesn't mean make them negative. It just says change the signs. So if I'm looking at f prime, I'm going to write 3, 4. Notice I changed the signs. If I look at e prime, I'm going to write 1, 2. Right? I didn't write -1, -2. I changed the signs. And if I look at d prime, 2, 5. That's pretty much it. Now looking at example 4, reflection across y equals -x. If I look at the board, it says that x wide becomes -y, -x. So I have to flip the numbers and change both signs. So if I want to get the coordinates of g prime, I'm going to get 2, -2. It doesn't seem like I did, but what I did is like I flipped my numbers and I changed both signs. If I look at f prime, I'm going to get 1, -4. I flip them and change both signs. The 1 was negative to begin with, so notice I wrote it as a positive 1. I changed the signs. And then e prime, I'm going to have 4, -3. On the quiz and test, obviously, I will ask you for all of them. On the homework, I will only ask you for one. Any questions on these? No? Okay. Now, looking at my last two examples, one of them has pictures, the other one doesn't. But on both, I'm asking you to write a rule to describe each transformation. So when you see the picture, you might see what's happening. If you see it, just write the answer. Right? If you see it. If you don't, follow a point. But make sure the values of the coordinates of the point that you're going to follow are not the same number, because you're checking if the numbers flip or not. So I'm going to follow the coordinates of u. Coordinates of u are 2, 3, because I want the numbers to be different, because I want to see if they flip or not. And I don't want any of them to be 0, because I want to see that the sign changes or not. And my coordinates of u prime are -3, 2. So 2, 3 becomes -3, 2. So what I ask myself to begin with is, do my numbers flip? Ignoring the signs, I see 2, 3 became 3, 2. So the numbers did flip. So I'm just going to write yx. Then I ask myself, did any sign change? You see the 3 became -3. So the y value, like the value that was y to begin with, switch signs. So now which one tells me that xy becomes -yx? 90 counterclockwise. So my rule will be rotation 90 counterclockwise. If you saw it that, yeah, it looks like I'm going 90 degrees against the clock. If you saw it from the beginning, well, good. You saw it from the beginning. But if you didn't, follow a point. Now, looking at number 6, that one we cannot see, right? That one, obviously, we had to follow a point. Point R is not a good point to follow, because 3 and 3, I would not know if my numbers flip. The point T is not good to follow, because it has a 0. I would not know if the 0 changes signs or not. So I'm going to follow Q. Here's Q and here's Q prime. The funny thing is that because Q is not straight above Q prime, when it switches us to the end, I don't know why my program does that. It does that on reflection. So I'm going to write reflection. I already know it's a reflection. See how Q send Q prime all the way to the right? It does that on reflections. So I'm already narrowing it to 4 choices. All right. I'm going to see my signs, my numbers. First, it was -3, 1. Then it became -3, -1. So I'm just ignoring the signs. I'm seeing if they flipped or not. They did not. So I'm just going to write XY. They did not flip. Then I want to see if any of them change signs. The 3s stay the same, but the Y value, 1, changed signs. So I want to see which rule tells me that XY becomes X -Y. Which one is that one?